So when it comes to uh, experience, encountering what's here, all the different ways that can seem to present itself, this encounter, um, there's the sense often that, and within the world at large, kind of unquestioned sense that we're having this experience. We as an individual, somehow apart from the experience, apart from what's occurring. That sense is it's a strong perceptual habit. It's all innocent, but this idea that I'm sitting here, I'm seeing this moment, I'm hearing the sounds of this other person's voice, I'm feeling whatever is here being felt, I'm noticing whatever's being noticed. Well, let's just look at that assumption a little bit, see if it holds up under scrutiny. What is it that's seeing whatever is being seen? What is that? What is hearing the sounds that you're hearing, that are being heard? What's sitting here right now? If you feel this life that you are, this aliveness that we associate with ourselves, feel that sense of your own being that we tend to personalize as me. Feel this being that you think of yourself as, that you imagine yourself to be. Feel a life force. This is all you're ever feeling anyway, is the life force. The life force of what's here. And notice how the life force, even though there's this sort of unconscious assumption operating sort of just there on sort of repeat, this notion that the being that you are is somehow bounded. Feel the being. The being that's sitting here, feel that. And then as you feel the being, the beingness, this vitality, do you actually find the boundedness that's often imagined? Do you find that? is there something that's encapsulated, that is got some clear boundary line around it, often thought of as the body that's sitting here? Or is there just life sitting here? Boundless, edgeless. The being that's sitting here, that has no edges to it. Just feel that. The edgeless nature of the being that you are. The being sitting here. There's a sense of localization, often, like here. But is it really localized? I mean, where does here end, or does here end the localized being, and there begin? Or is there just here? Because you can't really find there in the field of experience, because anywhere that consciousness may travel in the field of experience, what's encountered could be said to be here, present here. Right? So there's just here, in that sense, there's no space. There's no localization. Nowhere and everywhere. So the being that's sitting here is not a separate individual being. But life itself. The universe is sitting here, we could say. The cosmos is sitting here. Absolute reality is sitting here, literally. Because the seemingly separate, autonomous, isolated creatures we imagine ourselves to be are inseparable from the whole of reality. Simply emanations of that whole, expressions of that whole, right? So from this perspective, there's not an individual sitting here. Life is sitting here. Life is hearing. Life is seeing. Life is encountering. And what is it encountering? More life. We could say this is the impersonal perspective that doesn't exclude the experience of being a person, but at the same time radically transcends that notion, because the personal, what we call the personal, is completely non-personal at the same time. We could say from the personal perspective that we are a unique wave-like expression, a wave-like emanation of life, of reality, of the cosmos, a particular way life expresses itself. And then we can just turn the kaleidoscope and see that we've never been anything but the sea. We've never been anything but the ocean of existence. The wave is. There's no ocean to get back to. There's no totality to return to, no wholeness to recapture, because there's just the totality. There's just the sea, this, right? No matter what, that is the case. It has nothing to do. The totality being the totality is irrevocable. It is indestructibly the case. It is inviolably, unconditionally the totality, no matter what. There's no returning to that. There can be seeing that can't be departed from. We can see that right now. Like the universe, the Big Bang, the explosion of life, whether you think of that in a time-bound way, 13 billion, 14 billion years ago, reality comes into existence out of, I don't know what, or you see it right in this instant, reality coming into existence, the totality, this explosion of life. And the explosion of life is the expression of life. So all of the seeming pieces and parts, including the individual, imagines itself sitting here having this experience, is just the totality. So. And I think one of the innocent misperceptions, just ideas, that assumptions that we harbor, that can, I think, sort of function to reinforce the sense of an autonomous individual that, say, in a spiritual context, is trying to find its way back to the ground, back to reality, back to God, right? And then can feel like that autonomous individual somehow lost touch with that and wants to return to that, right? I think what can really perpetuate that is this innocent misperception of continuity, that there's a continuity to the individual, right? I mean, otherwise, how do we define ourselves as an individual? That suggests a kind of like, yeah, I'm this individual, I've got continuity. Because if I'm not continuous, then how can I define the individual? But just feel even what we think of as the personal expression that we are, feel how it's an unstoppable flow with no continuity whatsoever. Feel that. Every single aspect, body, ways that we might define ourselves as individuals. What do you mean I'm not an individual? I have this personality, I have this history, I have unique experiences that I have, right? This body, the way my mind works, all of that is discontinuous. Feel that right now. That's the flow. There's never been someone actually separate from this who could lose this. Feel that. There's just this unthinkably wondrous appearance that we call life. And this wondrous appearance we call life or reality hasn't like projected out some individual that then is separate from the life and has to retrieve that magnificent apparition of reality, find its way back to it. No, that's never occurred. There's just life. Not just, but there is only life. Only the totality. Being itself. Never apart from itself. Never actually missing itself. Impossible to lose itself. It can definitely appear as the experience we call having seemingly lost it and then going about looking for it to find it again. Where did it go? Where did reality go? Where did God go? I'm going to go on a spiritual path to find it. And so the one we imagine ourselves to be, the individual that's seeking to return to the ground, return to the divinity, return to God, just as we're not actually individuals sitting here listening to the Zoom call, but we are the cosmos sitting here. That whole process of seeking to return to the whole, to return to God, is God. And so from that perspective, the seeking is not a problem either. The looking for it is not a problem. That's also its expression, isn't it? Feel yourself as that wave of life, ever flowing, ever changing. The wave that is inseparable from the sea. Really feel that. Can never be, can never depart from the sea, and need not return to the sea because it never left the sea. Because there's just the sea. There's just the sea of life. Yes, experiences are changing all the time. And it can feel like the recognition of that inseparability can have a certain feeling of joy and at homeness, and which is wonderful. Right? The remembrance, if you will, can feel so even intoxicatingly wonderful. Like, coming home, back to reality, back to sanity. But remember that what's being seen in that moment of the impossibility of separation, it never actually occurs. Never actually occurs. That's the key. That even when it seems like it's occurring, it's still not occurring because it can't occur. The expressions of life cannot escape life and become something other than life. The expressions of the absolute or God or whatever you want to call it can't escape their basis and become something else. They are. There's just the ground of being. I'd love to hear from anyone that feels moved to share something or explore something like.
I was listening to a video of Eckhart Tolle, and he used the phrase that most people have a dysfunctional relationship to the present moment. And what he interpreted that to mean is that most people are, when they're complaining about what is, what they're really complaining about is their interpretation of what is.
Mhm.
And if you notice that, then you have a different relationship with the present moment.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly we've explored, a lot in these calls that our interpretations of what's going on here play a big part in, what we could call our suffering and our misunderstanding and our confusion, and also our sense of, because there's the interpretation of being separate from this that is sort of the linchpin of it all. That's an interpretation. I would take it a little step further from not knowing the larger context of what he was writing about, but from the perspective that I was exploring with you just a few moments ago, the notion that we are in a relationship with the present moment as an individual, and then we as an individual can change that relationship. I mean, I understand that, and has that way of framing it has its own value for sure. But we can also like explore that and the assumptions that underlie that whole formulation and see that that's not the whole story. There's not really an individual in relationship with something else called the moment. There's just the moment that, in a sense, completely subsumes that individual who imagines itself. It's like the moment seems to split off and become an individual that then looks back on the moment, has a relationship with the moment, and interprets it, or stops trying to interpret it, but that whole thing is kind of like a fantasy because there's just the moment. And yes, it can appear as an individual again, but just as there's no discernible boundary separating the ocean from the waves that it gives rise to, there's no discernible boundary between the moment of experiencing and the seeming individuals that then are in relationship with it. It's just this arising of the moment, and that really cuts through cuts to the heart of the matter. It's really not about changing the individual's experience or interpretation, but just seeing that individual can't be found as having an autonomous existence apart from the moment.
In my experience, may I?
Yes, please, Zoe.
In my experience, when I go to the boundless, when I feel the boundless, when I follow what you say, you accept your invitation, there's such a comfort, a deep, deep comfort that replaces the deep moan that I have as a nagging personality. It's so soothing and so comforting.
Yeah.
Knowing that, because your invitation has got two levels for me, at least I internalize it as such. The second is the radical acceptance, meaning that I go, not only that I feel that I'm a particle and I feel buoyancy and that weightlessness, but then I accept my nagging part as well. That is a gift for me. for this psychology is a gift because it's
Yeah.
been my hindrance systematically ever since. So
Yeah, that's beautiful.
what
And
makes it,
sorry, yeah, go ahead.
that's what makes your teaching and invitation different than, for example, Tolle's invitation, because you take a step towards the ground of being, and you constantly, I'm not saying that Eckhart doesn't, but it's just my ears absorbing it as such. It's just going to always taking a step radically and accepting even the nagging part, even the blind part, the part that is always struggling with the veil. So I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Zoe, I don't know if this will make sense, but what I want to say is that it's all about the seeing. So when you see it, as I know you do, when you're exploring this, that the inseparability, right? And you have this experience of like the comfort of that, which makes a lot of sense because it's completely at ease with itself, right? It's just, there's not a push and pull. There's not an individual trying to get somewhere. There's not an individual trying to guard itself against something, protect itself against something, find something. There's no this and that. And so from that perspective, there's complete ease. There's just nothing missing and no one missing it. And so, yes, it's just incredibly, we could say, nourishing and enjoyable. It's like it's enjoying itself because it is enjoying itself. Literally. It is itself, being itself, right? So, and I think the acceptance piece, I believe, is related to the insight that arises when you notice that. And this is very important, which is when you're recognizing, so you're being invited to recognize, wow, I can't find boundaries here. There's just this seamless life, this wholeness, the wholeness of the moment, the flow of experiencing, right? Where there's no pieces. It's just the flow of the ocean of life, of experience. The key thing is that you're not actually having, it's actually not more present when it's being noticed. And this is very key. What the insight is revealing, that is always the case. That's what's so powerful about it. And that's also what makes it so inclusive. And you could say accepting would be one way to talk about its nature, is it's this radical acceptance. But it's even beyond that, because the ocean, because that suggests there could be something other than acceptance. But again, from the perspective of the sea, it's not accepting the moments of the waves are doing what we might call grasping or looking or feeling agitated or feeling some unrest. It's like, it's not accepting, it is those waves. So it's beyond acceptance, right? It's like, it is all of it. So we could call that, we could use a word like acceptance. Maybe it captures a little bit of the flavor of that, but it's like an acceptance that has no opposite, called rejection. It's beyond acceptance. It's just being that, there's a moment of agitation. There's a moment of grasping, a moment of, we call seeking. That is the expression of life. So it's already the most radical embrace, right? The most radical, it's just being itself. And I always like to say that the deepest insights are revealing the most special experiences, I say, are the experiences that are revealing the specialness of all experiences. So they're not particular. So like even in a moment where, yes, it feels wondrously comforting and nourishing and healing and empowering to recognize what we're talking about. No question, I would never deny that for a second. But the key is to remember that what you're seeing is always the case.
Exactly. I would put it, add that it is, I mean, here as I experience it, it is allowing the space to let the resistance be part of that, the whole thing.
Right.
So the acceptance is not being foreign or in duality with resistance.
Right. Right.
That's what I'm.
Right. It's not,
It's just,
our tendency is to partialize this,
Yeah.
right? And imagine it looks a certain way, it feels a certain way, we associate certain experiences as somehow being closer to it, and so on. And that's just the innocent mistake that's made. It's not a particular experience. It's all experience.
mhm.
And that's what makes it so powerful and so impenetrably the case, so bulletproof. It can't be lost. It can't be lost. It isn't to say that we don't encounter moments that are less pleasurable or less comfortable, or,
No,
like,
no.
I would rather there not still be a bloody, pandemic or whatever is going on. And that the world was back to this sense of people freely engaging with one another without fear of infecting each. I mean, I have a preference that would be the case. And right now, it doesn't appear to be right now what's going on. but nevertheless, that entire description is that event is absolute reality.
But it's a partial description.
Sure, all descriptions are partializations, for sure. I mean,
So first you have to make a partial description, then you can have a preference.
right. And what's interesting is when I was talking about the impersonal perspective, like, well, what's doing that? I mean, like, as an individual person that imagines itself to be autonomous and have its own, generating its own agency and its own capacities, and it's like, no, the capacity to be so-called deluded and to misunderstand or seemingly miss this is the capacity of reality. Reality is doing that.
Mhm.
It's not it's not us, but we are reality. So it is us in that sense. But it's not personal. It's not.
See, feeling that is liberty.
How about the
Absolutely,
preference?
absolutely. It's complete freedom. It's
Yeah,
complete freedom. And complete freedom is what is always the case. Always the
Beautiful.
case. Always the case. Yeah.
So even the preferences are not personal.
Absolutely. I mean, if you even think about, like, okay, I have preferences for certain types of music, right? I mean, I'm also a musician. I have preferences for people singing in tune rather than out of tune, like a really strong preference. Why? Why is that there? I didn't make that preference. It's just there. I mean, I didn't create the preferences. Not that I wouldn't even, why do I like certain kinds of food? Why do I gravitate towards certain kinds of people and the resonances that I have, Why do I enjoy speaking about what I ultimately can't say words about? Why do I enjoy that? Why as a 18, 19-year-old did I even get interested in all this enlightenment stuff? I mean, where did that come from? There's no explanation for any of the inclinations and motivations and preferences that we think of as ours. I can't take ownership for those, nor any of the capacities that I may seem to have to speak about this, to write about this, to sing about this. I don't know where those come from. I don't know where anything comes from. Well, it comes from what everything comes from, whatever that is. And you know, it's interesting too, Zoe, just thinking about like insights and, you know, we all know this, I'm sure, you know, where there's been some moment of seeing something more clear, seemingly more clearly, insights arise. But however wonderful it can be to look backwards, you know, to look back in time at some insight and sort of try to remember the insight. Remember that insight I had? You know, it's like here is the insight. It's always right now. So the inseparability, let's say, of seeing that in a moment, you know, a moment ago, a week ago, a month ago, years ago, and it's like the deepest insights again are revealing what's always present. So it can be seen now, is being seen now, actually. It is here, not in the past. There's no past. And it's effortless. It's effortless, isn't it? Because that's its nature. So what is our nature? What is the nature of life? Is doesn't take work. Its nature is to be without boundary, without division, without separation. So that's why it's easy. It doesn't require work. Right? I'm gonna really try hard to get this. I tried so hard for so long, all that practice to try to manipulate my way into it. Oh my God. It was just interesting.
Sort of like the effort to open your eyes. You have your eyes closed and I can't see. And you just open it and there it all is.
Yeah, it's like, you know, your eyes are the color that they are, right? Brown, blue, hazel, green. How much effort does that take? None. Zero. Are you the divine absolute reality? Same like your eye color, it takes no effort. Just happens to be the case that you are. Your garden looks beautiful, Sylvia. I keep looking at it. The flowers.
Thank you, John. I think one of the most profound insights that I've had was the statement that you shared a few weeks ago. The birth of this moment is the death of this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Big wow.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no controlling or wanting the moment to be any different. It's simply the moment that we start to see it as static, it's already changed.
Already. It's amazing, huh?
Yeah, there's just so much freedom in that statement. It's in that insight. It's like whatever is going on in the world with all the suffering and all the
Mhm.
injustices. These are concepts that, as seeing ourselves separate, we lay over reality. But take those descriptions, labels, concepts away. It's just life. And it's, as I've shared with you, this magic show that has no labels, descriptions. It's simply itself, being itself continuously.
Mhm.
And we're part of that.
Right. And it eludes its own descriptions in a sense, because whatever is described is no longer. So the description just falls apart. It's like it just can't hold up. It doesn't hold up because it's as if the shape shifting is just simply too quick. You know, it's too quick for the describing faculty to catch up. It's like, sorry, I just became something else. You tried to describe me, but presto, I just, you know, the whole, like, you think about the consciousness making a map out of this moment, you know, like describing all the complexities of it and, you know, the event that is now. It's like you said, the birth of it, the appearance of it is the death of it, is the disappearance of it, is the vanishing of it. Just like my words are vanishing as they're spoken, aren't they? They just go away. They're just gone, gone, gone. And yet, there's the persistence of the flow, the persistence of the experiencing. So it's very strangely paradoxical, isn't that? It's always vanishing, not even here in a sense, because the vanishing is so quick. Like, how do we even see anything? Because it's gone instantaneously. If you're just really like with the instant, it has no time, right? It has no duration. It's just, but there's this, but that which has no duration shows up as what we call the flow of time, the flow of experience, the flow of life, the flow of reality, and which enables the melodies and the stories and the interpretations and all the stuff of what we call human life. The movie of life, you know, if it was just little flashes, like it would never show up as a movie, it would never show up as a story, as a, because we're kind of telling stories now about it, aren't we? We're using words and concepts to try to convey something about which there's not really anything that could be said about it from the perspective of the flash that has no duration. There's nothing to say. What could be said? Because it just goes up in a puff of smoke.
It's interesting. The snap has a duration, and a puff of smoke has a duration.
Right.
And
Again, language, you know, the failure of any image to try to convey what is beyond images and beyond. I mean, you know, I mean, could it be that it's that maybe the quantum physicists will reveal, or some new version of physics beyond quantum physics that might emerge will reveal that, in fact, as it seems to correspond with our experience, it's like what's here is this pointless point event that literally has no space, no time, no duration, no actual existence in a sense, because it never comes into form, because it has no duration. And yet it shows up as time and space and form and cause and effect. And I mean, it's astonishing. But there is a great freedom in feeling that natural release, you know, of the moment. It's like a fresh start every instant, literally. Reset, the reset button. A new universe. Presto. not colored by the past. Like they say in the Tibetan tradition, it leaves no trace. The moment leaves no trace, like the flight path of the bird in the sky leaves no trace. Like a line drawn in water leaves no trace, just vanishes.
We were hiking up the mountain yesterday, and I had a sense that every step that I took up the mountain, if I turned to look back, there was nothing behind me.
Mhm.
It was just this. There was no past
Right.
to the exertion of climbing the mountain. Everything just dissolved behind me
Right.
because there's just this.
Yeah.
And every step a new mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing that even our remembrance of what we call the past. And I was reflecting on some past events, and there was a certain kind of pattern of like reflecting on this past event. But I was noticing how, as I was saying to you, that even what we think of as familiar patterns, past patterns, like, oh, well, actually echoes of the past seem to keep reverberating in the present somehow. But the reverberations in the present of the past are fresh, they're new. So even our remembrance of the past is like, you've never, you have a memory of like my mother passed 5 or so years ago. So I can remember what it was like being with her, in person when she was alive. And there's this sense of a familiarity, right? That memory gives that sense of familiarity, like even, say you, like, okay, there's a past, we have a past, a history, we could describe it this way. So there's a familiarity, the way you look, the way you sound, the way you feel. But actually, if I'm really with what's here now, without that reference point, it's just absolute newness, absolute freshness, absolute. There's not a reference point for it. It's like hasn't been encountered. It's like going into new, and you're going into a new. There's a chapter in the book about my last book about like imagining you're visiting some planet that you've never visited before. So you don't have any reference points because all of the flora and fauna they're not terrestrial, right? So you have no reference point for them. You've never seen these colors, you've never seen these shapes. So this is actually the case that we're on a new planet every instant, in a sense. Because the particular way, just the particular way, like you look at the flowers in your garden there, and it's like, and you look at them and you can say, well, those familiar colors is like yellow and pink, like it seems like from here. But no, I just know that I'm encountering something now that doesn't really have a reference point.
Mm-hmm.
So is there an I?
You mean like an individual that's seeing that? No. The simple answer. There's just the seeing of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John.
Hi, Alicia.
Good morning to everybody. Well, it's probably not morning. Hello, everybody. You started today's talk talking about having that sense of returning home, or that sense of wanting to return home.
Mhm.
I've I think probably even as a young adult, I felt that way every day. And
Mhm.
as time passed on, as we're sitting in these conversations, just as Zoe mentioned today, some of these insights are pure liberty. I mean, they are liberate us from that sense of needing to go home.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like
I definitely know what you mean.
it's like it's relieving, and it's
Yeah.
it's welcoming, all those things. Great description, Zoe. I completely concur. You said it really well. But I also still well, it's probably just me, just my mind, wondering, am I missing something, or is there something more? But I think that as time goes on, and I listen to when we're in these conversations, and all this, everybody shares, it's becoming, for me at least, after these many months, I think about this, especially I think about what everything is, or the expansiveness of what everything is, especially when I hit a point of frustration, or something that may not be, like traffic. It kind of dissolves it. It just dissolves any kind of when I remember what everything is, I receive freedom.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'm going to be quiet because I can't even articulate what I'm thinking. Sounds
Yeah.
pretty bad.
No, it's, the recognition of, you could say there's just, like I'll tell a metaphysical story of sorts, there's just reality, the absolute reality, and then it gives rise to all of these, expressions, forms, life forms, including each one of us, let's say. And then, so actually, we're just like, there's the sun, and then there's the beams of the sun, right? Okay. So the sun shines and it radiates. The sunbeams are its radiation. That's a description of, the creative force of the universe shining and beaming its rays. And then the rays, its dance, it would seem, is one typically of then the beams that it's given birth to, its sunbeams that it's radiating, imagine themselves as having lost the sun, right? Lost home. And I think that's the itch. That's the itch we all have. And that itch takes a lot of different forms. We go looking for the sun because we know instinctively the sun knows it's the sun because there's only the sun. So it knows that because it is it. And then it seems to split itself off as sunbeams. And then the sunbeams imagine that they're separate from the sun, right? And we go looking for it. We do all sorts of read books and go on retreats. It's funny when you think about it, actually. It doesn't always feel funny, I know, but it can feel excruciaing.
Well,
But-
I kind of like retreats, only because I feel like I'm with my tribe.
Yeah,
I have
yeah. There's nothing wrong with anything. But the catch is that there's ways we can engage with the various things we engage in that can end up, without our maybe even realizing it, perpetuating that misunderstanding of separation. Yeah. That's the trick.
Sure.
Right? Like it's here on the retreat, it's here on the meditation cushion, it's here when I'm with this particular group of people. But then when I leave this setting and this whatever set of circumstances, somehow it seems to go away, right? But it's like, but meanwhile, you are the sunbeam You are the radiation of the sun, period. And that never goes anywhere, right? So that's it. That's it.
Well, there you go. You went and put another metaphor in my head. So I'll be thinking about it.
But this is what's so, but feel that you are the radiation of the sun of reality. What else could you possibly be? Everything about you, every cell, every molecule, every thought, every sensation, all of it is the radiating of the sun of reality, right? And so then, and then even the experiences that we describe, this is what I was speaking earlier with Zoe about, even the experiences that get described as, I'm not home and I want to return to home, and I don't like the feeling of like having lost the sense of being home. It's uncomfortable. I want to get back to that. That's an experience, isn't it? We all know it. I can guarantee you we all know what that feels like. I certainly do. And that experience itself is the radiation of the sun. That is one of its sunbeams.
Mm.
And that's what makes it bulletproof, when you see that no wave of experience can ever make the ocean more the ocean or less the ocean. No particular way the sun is beaming can make it less the sun or more the sun, because there's just the sun radiating, and you are its radiation always. So you're always home, because there isn't really a you. And there is a you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever actually used that metaphor before. I absolutely love it. Thanks for inspiring it.
Well, I won't forget it. That's for sure.
I love it too, because there's that sense of the power of the sun. It's a beautiful metaphor. It's brilliant. It's light. It's shining. It's radiating. It's indiscriminately shining, isn't it? It doesn't go, well, I'm not going to go over there, but I'll just go over here because I like that better. It's absolutely like, it will go everywhere and does go everywhere, and it fills the space, doesn't it? So the space is inseparable from the sun. Sorry, you were going to say something, Alicia?
Probably it's gone. It moved on.
It moved on like everything else.
Right. It's pretty sad sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing that when you think about it, it's amazing that the sun can seemingly forget that it's the sun. Isn't it?
You mean when it's obscured?
Well, it's never obscured, actually. That's
Right.
the thing.
Apparently obscured.
Right. But see, it's like, I remember hearing this analogy once, which I loved at the time, which was, if you look at the clouds, like in our normal life, the clouds, or where I am by the coast, the fog can seem to obscure the sun, right? It's blocking the sunlight. It's getting in the way of the sun. But from the perspective of the sun itself, there is no obscuring, is there?
Right.
Yeah. Never. It can be very powerful to, when experiences are arising, or events are occurring that, feel like whatever, uncomfortable or difficult, or we imagine are somehow lacking in some way, and problematic in some way, to feel, and our usual sort of, our tendency is to then try to correct those. And there's nothing wrong with trying to correct experiences or circumstances to be more in alignment with what we're envisioning for our life, what we gravitate towards, what we, find ourselves moved to have more of in our lives. Nothing wrong with that. But there's this other way of approaching those moments, which is to see them, to use the sun metaphor again, that those are in that moment, fear is arising. What we call fear is arising, that is the sunbeam that is appearing, and that is the sun. That is its appearance in the moment. That is its radiation. So imagine all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, all of your sensations are the radiation of the sun of reality. They are, actually. And so from that perspective, you can just relax with whatever is appearing, because it's home, actually. It might not, as Ed was pointing out about the descriptions, it may not seem that way. What do you mean it's home? I feel like shit right now. You're calling it being home? But that has to do with our describing. Because our descriptions are what create the sense of there's this and there's that. There's this is good and that's not so good. This is right. This is free and that's not so free. This is home and that's not home. That's what our descriptions tend to reinforce, that notion. But why going beyond the descriptions can be so liberating is because it can reveal that, no, the sun is the sun shining, irrespective of how it's showing up definitionally. It remains the radiation, it remains the radiance, no matter the particularities of it. And of course, the definitions, this is the other thing that the definitions do. They both create the hierarchies of experiencing, seeming hierarchies, better, worse, positive, negative. But they also are what create the sense of autonomous existence of the phenomena, because we've defined them, we've put a boundary around them, we've isolated them. Here it is, I've just defined the wave, I just put a line around it, I put a circle around it, and I just separated it out from the whole in order to define it. Just like I separate out the wave, I draw a line around it, there's the wave. See, it's right there. That's what the definitions do. But that's not actually, the phenomena don't have independent existence from the ground. They are its expression. The sunbeams don't have an independent existence from the sun. They are its expression. And then there's, from that vantage, there's no problem.
John, do you think these descriptions of home, or that sense of home, is something that's conditioned? Like for instance, here's a for instance. I was born and raised in New York City, and I don't go back there very often anymore. But when I do, I get as soon as I arrive and get out of the car, I can smell the bay. And I immediately have a sense of home. Like it's just, it's a sensory thing. And it just so these sensory things are connected to feelings of probably certainly childhood. I was about 11 when I left there.
Right.
So yeah, part of it is, we've put it in a box and this is the sense, but I've also had that sense, when I leave this house and I come home after 2 weeks away, oh, I'm good. It's good to be home.
Right.
So
Right.
it's just a familiarity.
That's,
or
yeah, I mean, that's
right.
of course like another kind of sense of being at home that is particular to certain environments where, I feel more at home with certain people. Let's
Yeah.
say I feel more at home in certain places. I mean, I remember returning to Maryland for a couple of years. I had a job there at the university, and I grew up in Maryland, and there was definitely a lot of things like fireflies and humidity and smells and caterpillars, things that aren't in California at all.
Yep. Yep.
And going back there was a sense of like, wow, it feels like home. It was like this familiarity, like you're saying. It was a beautiful feeling. But of course, the home that we're speaking about here is not a home that's particular to locales or particular to people or particular to anything. It's the home that doesn't go away. And it's actually not a feeling. It's the basis, you could say, of all feelings. It's the basis of all experiences. So it's a transcendental home. It's always home. And so the innocent mistake we can make is that when that's recognized, I might say something like that, and there's a moment of like, whoa, it's like, this is home just as it is. And then, as Zoe was saying, the relief of that, the freedom of that, how easeful that is, right? How nourishing that feels. I never, again, would deny that. But again, the insight is that home is always the case. I'm home. Home is this. There is no other moment. There's no other home. Where's the other home? In other words, you can't see another scene. You can't have another. If you say that this is a dream being dreamed, you cannot have another dream than the one that's being dreamed right now. This is the dream. This is the apparition. This is home, no matter how it looks. And that's what's different about this home. It's home with a capital H, because it's the basis of all. It's as much present when you feel at home when you're back in New York or I'm back in Maryland as when you feel like you're in some uncomfortable social situation. You'd rather not be there with the people, and now you're home in that moment.
What a beautiful way to describe that. That was beautiful.
And the way to recognize that is to come back to the feeling of the moment, not as an emotion, but as a felt sense of the moment that's beyond description. But there's just the flow of the moment. So there you are. You're next time you're at a social function. Will we ever get to do that again? you're at a social function without masks or with masks, whatever. There you are, and this experience is like, it feels like dystopian. It feels just out of sorts. There's something that feels off about it. It's like, feel the flow of life, the radiating of life. It's still there. The flow is still there of life. This radiation of the sun of reality. Where does that? It's creating that moment that you might call uncomfortable or awkward or dystopian or confusing. Or there it is, the sun shining as that moment. It's an unconditional home.
Yes. That's beautiful.
I would agree. It is beautiful. Indeed. Just so happens to be that way. Would seem to be.
this metaphor of sun will make a nice song. If you ever feel like writing, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
What would be the title, Zoe?
Rays of sun. Huh?
The sun is always shining.
Except when it's cloudy.
Yeah, and it's still shining. Sorry.
Good.
It's so relentless, the shining. And you know, it's so powerful to see. I was thinking about this feeling, the shining, you know, that we were talking about you don't have to do anything to make your eyes the color that they are, right? It's effortless, it's natural. And you don't have to do anything to make this shine, do you? The appearance of the moment, the existence of the moment, all the shapes and forms it seems to assume, it's shining, isn't it? And what is required to make the shining be here is absolutely nothing, because its nature is to shine. Here it is. The moment is just here. We're not creating it. It's creating itself somehow, generating itself. And so that can give rise to kind of a sort of remembrance of like, wow, there can be a relaxation and just appreciation of the shining of this, the emanating of this, the upwelling of this moment, it's not obviously not explainable, is it? I mean, it's like we're all of it, including what we think of as ourselves, is being created, in every instance somehow. Astonishing.
John, I know it's getting close to the end of the time.
Mhm.
I just wanted to mention or ask, I left you a message. Would you have you considered doing it like an extended, like mini retreat or day long, or sort of like what Peter does from time to time?
I've done that in person. I haven't thought about doing that online. I mean, I think if there was enough interest, that's a possibility. If people felt that would be valuable to stretch it out over a longer period of time. And Alicia was saying she likes retreats. So, and even though I said they weren't necessary, we could potentially do something like that if there was enough interest. So,
okay.
Maybe I'll send a message out to people who have been, sort of more regular attendees, and see if there might be interest in that, something like that, a weekend of gathering together, for longer chunks of time over, say a weekend, maybe that could be fun.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
Thanks for the suggestion. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah. It was lovely to be with all of you. As always, thank you for the wonderful questions and sharing, and enjoy the sun. It's always shining.
Thank you. I have to wait till tomorrow, but thank you so much, John.
It's still shining even the nighttime, isn't it?
Especially here in France, yeah, till 10 o'clock.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. All right, be well.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Bye for now.